welcome to our channel. Today we're going to be talking about this book called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Interesting.
Have you had a chance to look at it at all?
Yeah, I've definitely glanced through it, and it looks fascinating. Seems like it really dives deep into this idea of maximizing success, right?
It does, and you know what really struck me is that it goes way beyond your typical self-help stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just like, think positive and everything be great.
Right.
It's more about, like, practical strategies.
Exactly. And I think what's really cool is that Hardy, as the publisher of Success Magazine,
Oh, yeah.
he's seen it all, right? He's seen countless success stories, and he's kind of boiled it down to this core principle, the compound effect.
Okay, so let's break that down.
Sure.
What exactly are the compound effect?
So in a nutshell, it's this idea that consistent small actions taken over time lead to huge results. It's kind of like that snowball effect, right? You start small, but as you keep going, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it really debunks that whole overnight success myth that we see everywhere.
Right, because everybody thinks, oh, they just got lucky or they just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Right. But Hardy's saying, no, real success is built on dedication, not shortcuts.
So it's about, like, consistent effort over time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not about finding some magical secret formula or, some quick fix.
Right. Yeah.
It's recognizing that even tiny changes, repeated consistently, compound over time. Like, think about this. It's like a penny that doubles in value every day for 31 days.
Ah, yes. The magic penny analogy.
Exactly. Now, most people, if you offered them, a few $1 million up front or that penny,
They probably take the millions.
they'd probably take the millions.
Right.
But by the end of those 31 days, that penny is worth over $10 million.
Wow.
So it really shows you the power of compounding.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a really powerful illustration of how small, consistent actions can lead to exponential growth.
So what does this tell us about achieving our goals then?
Well, I think the big takeaway is that it reminds us to play the long game, right? Real lasting success doesn't come from shortcuts or quick fixes.
Yeah.
It's about consistently making those small positive choices day after day.
And Hardy himself is a great example of this. I mean, he talks in the book about how, his disciplined upbringing really shaped his success.
That's true.
His dad was a former football coach.
Yeah.
And really instilled this no excuses mentality in him from a young age.
Yeah, he had a very strict routine,
Yeah.
chores, early wake-up calls, always focused on achieving results.
But do you think that's the only way to achieve success?
Well, that's a great question, and I think,
Or are there other paths?
Hardy's upbringing definitely played a role in his journey, but the compound effect isn't about replicating his exact experience, right? It's more about recognizing that the choices we make each day, even those seemingly insignificant ones, they accumulate over time.
Yeah.
And they ultimately shape our lives.
So how do we start actually applying the compound effect in our own WN lives?
That's the big question, right?
Where do we even begin?
Well, Hardy really emphasizes that every choice matters, and he uses this really interesting example of 3 friends.
Oh, tell me about this, the 3 friends.
Yeah, so imagine 3 friends who start out pretty similar.
Okay.
They have similar incomes, similar lifestyles, similar health.
Okay.
The first friend just kind of coasts along, doesn't really make any changes.
Okay.
The second friend makes some small positive changes.
Like what kind of changes?
Like reading 10 pages a day, cutting back on sugary drinks, maybe listening to a motivational podcast.
Okay, so like small, manageable things.
Exactly, small, manageable things. And then the third friend makes small negative choices.
Oh.
Indulges in unhealthy snacks, watches excessive TV, things like that.
So they're kind of going the opposite direction.
Yeah, they're going in the opposite direction. And over time,
What happens?
what happens is that those small choices create this wider and wider gap between them.
Interesting.
The friend making positive choices experiences positive results in their health, their finances, their overall well-being.
So it's like a ripple effect almost.
Exactly. And the friend making negative choices, well, they find themselves further away from their goal.
And the friend who stayed stagnant.
They just stay stuck.
They're just treading water.
Treading water, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a really powerful reminder that we have to be mindful of even the little decisions we make each day.
It's not about making those huge changes overnight.
No, it's about consistency.
It's those small things that add up over time.
Absolutely. And I think Hardy really highlights that even tiny actions repeated consistently can compound over time and create significant results, both positive and negative.
It makes you think about all those little choices, doesn't it, that we make every day?
It really does, yeah.
And speaking of choices, have you come across any resources lately that help people make more positive choices?
You know what? There's this really great YouTube channel I've been watching called Affirmify Journey. They have a lot of really motivational content.
That's a great suggestion, and it actually reminds me of another crucial point that Hardy stresses in the book.
What's that?
Taking 100% responsibility for our lives.
Oh, yes. Owning our outcomes.
Owning our outcomes.
This is a key principle of the compound effect, and Hardy argues that we are all self-made. Whether we want to take credit for it or not, he challenges us to stop blaming external circumstances.
Right, because it's so easy to just point the finger.
He did.
And say, oh, well, it's because of this or it's because of that.
Right, exactly. And instead, focus on what we can control.
Yeah.
And he shares this great story about keeping what he calls a Thanksgiving journal for his wife.
What is that?
Where he wrote down one thing he appreciated about her every single day for a year.
Ah, that's so sweet. Did it work?
It did. It completely transformed his view of his wife and their relationship.
Wow.
And it's a great example of how shifting our perspective can change our outcomes.
So how do we start taking ownership, then, of our outcomes?
Well, Hardy suggests this simple but powerful tool, a scorecard.
A scorecard.
He suggests tracking your habits and choices in a specific area of your life for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And it really helps you become aware of those unconscious patterns that are driving your behavior.
Yeah, I think a lot of people aren't even aware.
They're not.
Of the choices they're making every day,
It's all on autopilot.
Yeah, it's autopilot. And so the scorecard really brings it to light.
It brings awareness
Yeah.
to those automatic actions
Mm-hmm.
and helps you make more conscious and deliberate choices.
It's like shining a light on those habits, good or bad.
Exactly. And speaking of habits, they play a huge role in this whole compound effect thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
habits, whether good or bad, they control our lives, they shape our thoughts, our actions, our outcomes. But the good news is we have the power to change them.
So we're not just stuck with whatever habits we've developed over time.
No, we can break free.
Okay, good. So how do we do that?
Yeah, we're not stuck. And in fact, Hardy points out that almost 95% of what we do is driven by learned habits.
Wow. 95%, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's starting from childhood, right?
Oh.
All these automatic responses, and they can be helpful in some cases, but they can also really sabotage our efforts to achieve our goals.
It's like we're on autopilot.
Exactly. We're just going through the motions, not really thinking about the consequences.
And the scary part is you don't see the negative effects right away, right?
Right. They accumulate slowly,
Yeah.
almost invisibly, until one day you wake up and you're like, whoa, how did I get here?
How did I get so far off track?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we break free from these bad habits then?
Well, Hardy offers some great strategies, and one that I think is really helpful is identifying your triggers. He calls them the big four.
What are the big four?
The who, what, where, and when of your bad habits.
Okay.
So it's like becoming a detective for your own behavior.
I like that.
Right. You have to understand what situations, emotions, or even people trigger those unwanted actions.
So it's like once you know what the triggers are,
Exactly.
then you can start to avoid them.
Avoid or manage them.
And manage them, yeah.
Right. Create a plan.
Okay. And he also talks about why power, right?
Yes. Having a strong enough reason for making a change, you know that why power can help you stay motivated when things get tough.
Yeah, you got to know why you're doing it.
Absolutely. It's about setting a destination for yourself, right?
Because if you don't know where you're going,
yeah,
any road will get you there or something like that, right?
Exactly. It's so easy to get lost along the way if you don't have that clear sense of purpose.
Speaking of getting lost, Hardy tells this story about a CEO who was struggling with his company culture.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, and the CEO was so disconnected.
He was so out of touch.
He hadn't even been to certain parts of his own building in 5 years.
Can you imagine?
That's wild. So what did Hardy tell him to do?
Well, his advice was pretty simple, actually. He said, just take a walk around the office 3 times a week.
Okay.
And acknowledge at least 3 employees who are doing something right.
Really? That's it?
That's it. Just acknowledge people.
Yeah, just a simple acknowledgement.
It's so interesting.
And it had a ripple effect.
Really?
Throughout the whole company, employee morale improved, customer satisfaction increased, even profits went up.
So just that one little change.
That one little change.
Led to all these positive outcomes.
It's amazing.
We should be amazing.
It is. And I think it's a great example of how small changes compounded over time can create that positive momentum.
Speaking of momentum, that's another big concept in the book, right?
Yes.
Big Mo.
All about building momentum and using it to accelerate your progress.
It's like when you're on a roll.
Yeah.
You know, you're hitting your stride, everything's clicking. Exactly. And Hardy uses some really compelling examples, like Michael Phelps, right?
Yeah, the Olympian.
I mean, his success wasn't just talent.
Right.
It was years of disciplined training, building routines.
Consistency.
Consistent effort. That's what led to those phenomenal results.
It wasn't like he just showed up one day.
No, it was years of dedication.
And was it the iPod? The Apple iPod? Is that one of the examples too?
Yeah, that's a great example because the iPod wasn't an immediate hit.
Right. It took time.
It took a few years.
For it to build momentum.
Yeah.
And then become the dominant player in the market.
It's interesting how that momentum concept applies to like companies and products.
It does, yeah.
And even ideas, right?
Ideas, everything. It's this universal principle.
So it's not just about working hard. It's about like working smart.
I think so. Yeah.
Having those systems and routines in place that help you build that momentum.
Absolutely. Hardy's a big advocate for streamlining your efforts.
Yeah. And making it easier to stick to those positive habits.
Now, what about managing our influences? Because that seems to be a big part of the compound effect, too.
Yeah, it's huge. And Hardy breaks it down into 3 key areas: input, associations, and environment.
Okay, let's talk about those.
And he argues that we need to be very intentional about what we allow to influence our thoughts, our behaviors, our well-being.
Let's start with input, because I think that's especially relevant today.
Yeah.
With like the internet and social media.
Constant bombardment of information.
We're just bombarded all the time.
Exactly. And Hardy recommends a pretty strict mental diet.
What does that mean?
He's very careful about the information he consumes. And he encourages us to do the same.
I think I heard that he doesn't even watch the news.
That's right. He doesn't watch or listen to any news.
Wow, he just tunes it all out.
He believes that the constant negativity can be detrimental.
Yeah, it can be really draining.
Draining, yeah, to your mental and emotional well-being.
So it's about being selective with what you let into your mind.
Absolutely. Filtering out the noise and focusing on the input that truly nourishes and supports you.
It's like, you know, choosing to drink from a clear, pure spring rather than a polluted river, right?
That's a great analogy, yeah. You want to nourish yourself with information that uplifts and inspires.
Right, not stuff that's just going to drag you down.
Exactly. And along those same lines, he talks about the people we surround ourselves with.
Our associations.
The associations, yeah. It's not just the information we consume, but also the company we keep.
Okay, so tell me about that. How does he break that down?
So he suggests evaluating your relationships and categorizing them into 3 groups.
Okay, what are the groups?
Dissociations, limited associations, and expanded associations.
Okay, so dissociations, that's like the people you got to cut out completely.
Yeah, those are the energy vampires, the naysayers, the ones who constantly criticize and discourage you.
Got to get rid of those people. They're toxic.
It can be really toxic, yeah.
And then what was the second one? Limited associations.
Limited associations are the people you enjoy in small doses, but you don't want to spend too much time with them.
Okay, like acquaintances?
Yeah, acquaintances, maybe some family members.
Yeah, you know, you like them.
You like them.
But you don't want to be around them all the time.
Not all the time, right?
And then the third one, expanded associations.
Those are the people you want to bring closer, the ones who inspire and uplift you.
The ones that make you feel good?
Yeah, the mentors, the role models. The friends and colleagues who encourage you to pursue your dreams, believe in your potential.
Okay, so you want more of those people in your life.
Absolutely. You want to surround yourself with people who add value.
And then the third area, the environment.
Yes, environment.
So that's like your physical space.
Your physical space.
But also like your mental space, right?
And your mental space, exactly.
Okay.
And Hardy argues that our surroundings can either support or sabotage our goals.
So if you're trying to work and you've got like a messy desk.
A cluttered workspace.
Yeah, it's going to be harder to focus.
It's going to be much harder, yeah.
It's like trying to meditate at a rock concert or something.
Exactly. You need that environment that's conducive to success.
Okay.
So Hardy talks about having a clean, organized, inspiring workspace.
And I guess that applies to your mental space too, right?
Yeah, the thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes you cultivate.
So it's not just about decluttering your desk, it's also about decluttering your mind.
Exactly. And Hardy reminds us that We get in life what we tolerate.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So if we tolerate negativity, disrespect, procrastination, that's what we're going to experience. But if we set high standards for ourselves in our lives, we'll attract more positivity, respect, and productivity.
It's like creating a mental environment that supports your growth.
Exactly. And surrounding yourself with people who uplift and inspire you.
So it's like taking a holistic view of your life, right? Making sure all those pieces are working together.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Aligning your thoughts, your actions, your relationships, your environment.
Have you ever noticed how, like, even just rearranging your furniture can, like, shift your perspective a little bit?
It can. It can totally shift your energy.
It's like you're in a new space.
It's like a fresh start.
And Hardy even talks about, like, moving to a new city can change your whole outlook.
Absolutely. Sometimes you need that external change to trigger an internal change.
That's so true. It's like that saying, change your thoughts, change your world, or whatever.
Exactly.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
And there's still so much to talk about, like how to accelerate your results.
We haven't even talked about giving back and making a positive impact.
Ooh, yeah, that's a big part of it too.
But before we get into all that, I wanted to remind our listeners about a resource.
Yeah, what is it?
If you're looking to expand your knowledge and skills in a variety of areas, I highly recommend checking out lingopediamagazine.com.
What do they have?
They offer a wide range of courses and ebooks on topics that can really help you achieve even bigger results in your life.
Oh, wow, that's a great resource. Lingopediamagazine.com. I'll have to check that out myself. And it actually reminds me of how Hardy talks about constantly learning and growing and pushing ourselves to be better. So speaking of pushing ourselves in, let's talk about those strategies for accelerating our results, because he has a whole section on that, right?
He does, yeah. He calls it going above and beyond.
Going above and beyond.
It's about finding that extra gear, that multiplier, as he calls it, pushing past your comfort zone and exceeding your own expectations.
Do you think most people just settle for good enough?
I think it's easy to do that, especially when we're busy and overwhelmed. But Hardy challenges us to really strive for excellence in everything we do. And he uses this great analogy from weight training. If your program calls for 12 reps, but you push yourself to do 15, those extra 3 reps.
That's where the magic happens.
That's where the real growth happens. Yeah.
You're really pushing your limits.
Yeah, exactly. It's that extra effort, that willingness to go beyond what's comfortable, that really separates those who achieve extraordinary results from those who just settle.
So it's not about being superhuman or anything.
No.
It's just about having that grit.
The grit, the determination to keep pushing even when it's tough.
And Hardy talks about, like, going above and beyond what's expected, right?
Yeah, he talks about creating a WOW factor.
Like, how do you do that?
Well, he shares some great examples like Oprah giving away cars to her entire audience.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Talk about exceeding expectations, right?
That was crazy.
It was brilliant. It generated so much buzz and goodwill for her brand. And then there's Richard Branson, right?
Oh, yeah, Richard Branson's always doing something crazy.
Always doing these outrageous stunts to launch his products, like driving a tank down Fifth Avenue to introduce Virgin Cola.
I remember that. So it's about being bold and memorable.
Yeah, creating an experience that people will talk about.
But how do we do that in our everyday lives? No. I mean, it's easy to think about these big, grand gestures, but what about the small stuff?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a grand gesture. Hardy uses the example of how he used to hand-deliver SOLD signs to his real estate clients.
Really?
It was a small but thoughtful gesture that made a big impression and helped him stand out from the competition.
So it's those little things that make a difference.
The little things done consistently.
And that brings us back to the compound effect.
Full circle.
Right, it all comes back to that.
It always comes back to that.
Those small, consistent actions over time.
Yeah, and as we wrap up our deep dive into the compound effect, one thing that really resonated with me was Hardy's emphasis on giving back, helping others. He argues that the more we focus on contributing to something bigger than ourselves,
the more successful we'll be.
The more success we'll experience in our own lives.
It's not just about, like, getting rich or whatever.
No.
It's about making a difference.
It's about making a positive impact on the world.
So what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners will remember from this deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that success isn't a lottery ticket. It's not about luck or overnight miracles. It's about making those small, consistent choices every single day that compound over time.
It's about taking responsibility for your life.
Owning your outcomes.
building those positive habits,
Managing your influences.
and finding ways to accelerate your results.
Exactly.
And it's about remembering that even those tiny actions can have a huge impact, especially when you stick with them, like that penny that doubles in value every day.
It seems insignificant at first, but over time,
The growth is exponential.
it's all about playing the long game and trusting that those consistent small efforts will eventually lead to those remarkable results.
So as we wrap up here, what's one small change that our listeners can make today to start building their own compound effect?
That's a great question for everyone to reflect on. And remember, even the smallest step in the right direction is a step worth taking.
Absolutely. Well, we've only scratched the surface of the compound effect today, but hopefully this has given everyone some good food for thought.
We've explored some powerful principles and strategies, and the key is to put them into action.
That's right. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and like this podcast. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the compound effect and what small changes you're going to make in your own life.
And until next time, keep making those small positive choices that will compound into extraordinary results.